All right, everyone. I'm excited to get started. I'd like to welcome our panelists onto the call. So if you would please come onto the stage, ladies. Hey. Oh, wonderful. So excited to have you both here.
My sister, so she just wanted to watch again.
Hey, sis. Hi, sis. So I'm Melanie, and I'm the founder and director of PROPA, Puerto Rican Organization for Performing Arts. It's a project, it's a grassroots arts education project that has been under which I have done my cultural work since 2003. So we've been doing this. We've all been doing this. All of us on the panel have been doing what we've been doing for a minute. And we're here to kind of come together, share with you some of our synergy, how we have kind of communed together with the ancestors, and how they have informed what happens in our lives today. So I'd like to just for those who don't know, and if you're here, you already know these two queens, these two legends. Today, today we have with us, and I'm going to use genealogical names. So I'm going to use first and last name, right? Mommy and Papi. I love that about Puerto Rico, that we retain, and I know that's a Spanish colonial remnant, but we retain both names. And for genealogists, it's so wonderful to be able to have those references. So today we have with us Ana Garcia Falcón, better known as Lady Rokafella, Lady Rokafella. Yes. Hi. And then we also have with us Teresa Ayala Núñez, better known as Teresita, Lah Tere, Lah Tere. Hey.
Hi, bendición.
Wonderful to have you both here. So,
thank you.
I'm going to get us started, but with some screen sharing. But I'd like if you, Anna, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And yeah.
Okay, cool. Peace, everyone. I'm here in the Bronx. Originally from East Harlem. My parents came from Puerto Rico in the 50s. And so my sister, who is 9 years older than me, completely first generation, I ended up becoming sort of a second generation New Yorican, picking up the traditions and folklore of my parents, but then really picking up what was emerging, which became hip hop. And so, you know, kicking rhymes in the staircase, you know, checking out who's dancing and what's going on, eventually making my way into the actual culture and becoming a bgirl, you know, after dancing in the clubs, dancing house. Of course, you know, salsa was at home. So having this duality of cultures, but also growing to meet activists, to meet educators, and then realizing that hip hop could be that platform that informs, unites, activates minds. And so, you know, through the dance, I met people like Lah Tere who were on the similar path of using art as a way to build character, but also as women, you know, who are nurturing, who are battling, who are, you know, educating and trailblazing. So it was very refreshing for me to meet Lah Tere and to work with her through Mama's Hip Hop Kitchen for about 13, 14 years now, I think. And so I'm here. I recently became a professor at the New School, and I'm still here in the, you know, Sotomayor projects, still doing Tuesdays and Fridays with young people and working through dance, working with Bronx Academy of Arts and Dance, you know, working with the Bronx Museum, any institution that will take what I have to offer and become a bridge. I'm down for that. And, you know, I'm still, you know, excited to find out more of my family and my lineage, knowing that there, you know, there were ancestors, but our families maybe did not try to investigate and research because, you know, you're in the now and there's so much intensity happening that you don't really sit down to find out. Bisabuelo, tatarabuelos. So thank you, Melanie, for bringing some information to me, to us, of who existed when and from where. So thank you. Thank you again.
Tere.
Hi, I am in gratitude. Love you, Roca and sister. So I'm Teresita, first generation born here in the mainland. My parents migrated here, mommy in the 60s, papi in the 70s. They fell in love here in Chicago. So I am a Chicagoan, a Shy Rican, not that shy though. A Shy Rican though. A lot of my work, my parents were educators in the community, Humboldt Park community. And so by nature, just a community organizer, right? Because my parents were educators. So there was nothing else to do other than either organize your community or organize your community to be a part of a whole bunch of after school programs. That was it, because you had to either be the statistic or beat the statistic, and I didn't have the choice. There was no choice for me, actually. I had to. So thankfully, I had organizations like Aspira and the Boys and Girls Club and the Park District that supported me in my leadership. A lot of things happen when you're in a city that's riddled with gun and gang violence. And so that put me in a position to really have to figure out what were gonna be the next steps for my life. And so I ended up moving, go away to college, but then I ended up moving to New York City. And New York City, that's where I become a global citizen, really, right? Because Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in the world, pretty much. And so I end up becoming a global citizen because my neighbors are of all different parts of the world. And that's really where I learned about a different kind of activism, which was more of a global activism, not necessarily just based around Puerto Rico, because that's what we were doing in our community. And so gratitude to all of those folk that taught me the next layer of like leadership, right? Which Anna is a part of that. A different Rokafella and hip hop basically showed me this next level. I was really a salsera, hip hop I wasn't raised into hip hop. I didn't live in the Bronx, right? And so when I moved into the Bronx, that changes everything for me, because I start understanding that I could tell my story and through hip hop, and that I was not going to be judged for what my story was. So it liberated me. In that, I end up, becoming a part of a hip hop group. We do human rights hip hop, travel the world. And then when that kind of like shifts and changes for me, because then I become an older woman, right? And I'm like looking at myself like, okay, what's the next step? I don't want to do this forever. Then I start looking into how I can be an educator. And so that's really where I'm at now. Oh, so then I do Mama's Hip Hop Kitchen, which is where me and Anna, like really, we've cried, laughed, and done all kinds of stuff on the stage, performed together. With the intention of having justice at the forefront and giving women a safe space to be able to share what it is that they need to share from a space of non-judgment, like really just a safe platform. Fast forward is 14 years later, I end up moving back to Chicago, and I am now caretaking for my beautiful parents that are actually watching now. So it's such an honor to even have them present to witness their story, my dad's story. And so now I'm an educator, and I teach emotional intelligence to children and teens. And that is where I am at right now. And Mama's Hip Hop Kitchen is still going on. And we're just, anything reproductive justice, anything women's rights, that's where we're at right now. I'm just trying to make sure that we move the agenda forward.
I love it. I love it. And you both are doing such powerful, important work in our community, for our community, and reaching out. It's grassroots. It's right. But it's global. It reaches out. It has such a far reach. It has such a far footprint. Your influence, your love, your covering has just really gone out into the world. And for me, I always look at that through the lens, as a genealogist, I always look at that through the lens of, what's pushing you? What's that impulse? What's that impetus that keeps you moving? What is that that's helping you align on your path, getting to where you need to be because of what you were created to do in this life. And it's clear, I think it's clear to so many that the two of you are doing exactly what you were created to do, and that you're both living your purpose. And it's just so clear because of how many lives you are positively impacting. I just want everybody to know, like, we're all emotional. It's been a super emotional process. I already got my tissues right here. I mean, you know, we all might just be bawling at some point or throughout. So just get ready for that. But we've got a lot to cover today. There's so much. With Anna, and I've been working with Anna about, thank you, Sybil says we are real, not emotional. And we should own that, right? It's okay. I definitely am claiming that. I'm definitely claiming that. Because we're in touch. We're in touch, and we feel open enough to share that with you all. So through this process, we have covered archival records. We have kind of used oral history. We have used genetic analysis, DNA testing. And we have really been able to uncover so much. This session is not even going to be able to contain all of what, and I've spoken with both Roca and Tere, and we're just like, this is the beginning. There's so, the road is so long for us on this path. So, yes, I'm sorry, only the panelists are visible. This is a webinar, not a Zoom call, so only the panelists are visible for everybody. But let's get started. Let's start talking about those ancestors. It was important to me to kind of explore with both of these leaders, who is it that is kind of walking behind them? Who is it that is guarding and protecting and loving and caring and pushing and lifting them up? Who is it? What is it? What are these circumstances that kind of coalesced to bring the energy and to bring the experiences that are living out through their work? And that'll be different for every single person. You can have siblings that, even if you take a genetic test of some kind, your results will be different. Let's say it's a haplogroup test. We'll get to that later. But if your genetic makeup is different, we're all unique. And I believe that on a spiritual level as well. What is meant for us spiritually is meant for us individually. The tidbits that we remember, the memories we collect, the pieces of information that we receive in conversations, it's meant for us because it's part of our path and part of our journey. So let's get started with Tere. Tere, you when we came into this work together, you had already been doing so much work. You had already done so much work on your own. You had information, you had archival information, you had oral history. You had even done some DNA testing on your own before this. So we kind of came in with some material to work with that was really rich. And let me just, I want to share screen. So, let's see. There we go. As we have some visuals for folks, I want to make sure we're able to see some of the materials that we've been working with. It's really beautiful, but give us like an overview. What did you come into the process with? And then we'll get into kind of what we discovered during the process.
Okay, so I love seeing that Afrodescendiente. That makes me feel really seen. This is a really big deal, you know. Especially when you're the kid that travels back and forth to Puerto Rico. So you're like a gringa, but you're like, you know, you're a gringa, but you're like, la prima de allá afuera, right? And always still being the daughter of a Black man, whether he speaks Spanish or not, right? And so it's dope to be identified, to see myself identified as that on your screen. So that's first. So the work that I have done has been, I've been blessed. Really, this is a blessing because my ancestors have been doing the work before me. It just literally fell in my lap, passed down. So my grandma, just the fact that my grandmother has a school named after her and was a published author and was one of the first really Black women at the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras, and like a pioneer of night school. So that's the story that I had already, like I was raised with that story because we would go visit my grandmother's school, the grammar school that's named after her for the graduations. So I was like naturally, because of my Titi Cherry, and Titi La and Titi Ilia, I was naturally kind of like put in there. And I think it has a lot to do with my name also being Teresita, right? And my grandmother's name being Maria Teresa Serrano. So, and my grandmother being, and my tia being the Teresa. And so that name is just a part of our family. So it was important for them to put me, to see where I came from. So that kind of energy was already a part of the conversations. And I got to give props to my mom, even though this is the paternal piece, right? My mom was the one that made sure that I didn't miss a step with that information, like making sure I got to Puerto Rico, making sure that I was with my Black family, with my African family, because mommy's family is different, right? More European, Española. And so, I came in with that, and that's pretty much where, that's all that I've had, is that, you know, which is a lot. And where do you start with all of that information? Like, how do you represent, as a legacy, what do you do with that information? You know, especially if you're not abundant, if you're not financially like rich, where you could say, oh, I'm just gonna do a philanthropy and qué sé yo ni qué, and create this and a state-of-the-art that. So, all I knew is that I could not let my grandmother's name just become like a Darwin school or schools like that they just fade into, they get normalized, right? No, this is a Black woman that did a lot of things for the education system in Puerto Rico, and her name needs to be, she's important. People know how to read because she took the time out and left her own family to make sure that other people could read and write. And I think that put me in a position to like want more. So
It's legacy. You already were aware of that legacy in your family, and it filled you, it motivated you. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. She mentioned a school that's named, it's an elementary school. It's there. It's named in Carolina, in Villa Fontana, right?
Villa Fontana, yep.
Villa Fontana in Carolina. Right there, for folks who don't know, it's right where the central airport is, or the primary airport for the island. It flies right into Carolina. And Tere's family has been in Carolina even before it was called Carolina, when it had a different name. Her family's been there for at least about 200 years. And we started looking at that, and we were looking at records. So I want to move to some records, if that's okay.
Do it.
So we'll go back and forth. So one of the things, Tere had already started creating her own family tree as well. She had some names in there, and you know, I always ask folks, like, give me some names to start with, some places, some dates, and let me see what I find. And so I started digging, and I was able to find it as much as she had found, and we went a little bit further back in a couple of ways. So Tere, why don't you just share what that was? So let's kind of, I know, grab the tissue. Jasmine said, like, she's feeling like that ancestral energy is so powerful here today.
Gotcha.
And I was telling Tere before the call, because we had a little check, and I said, look, last night I was up till like 4, getting ready for this, trying to be connected, like feel the energy. This happens before every panel. Like, I just have to sit with the energy and what is it? What am I feeling? How do I want to like start it off? And and what needs to be said. And almost inevitably, I don't know why I haven't learned yet, like you just can't plan it, right? Wow. You can't plan it because it's gonna be what's gonna be. So Tere, let's go through the generations so we can help everybody understand. You mentioned yourself, you mentioned your parents, you mentioned your grandmother, but let's go in order. So with Tere, we looked at Tere's dad's maternal line. And so that was very intentional. We kind of looked a little bit in some other places really early on, but we decided to focus. And with every person that I work with for this particular series, I always ask them, okay, you know, this can go on forever. I've been doing my own genealogy since 1997. There's so many directions to go. It can never be done, you know, quickly. So let's choose a path. Let's decide what we want to learn and what you're open to learn. And maybe, you know, try to get attuned to what is meant for you to learn right now. And I have a little testimony about that a little bit later on. Like, I've been ready to learn some stuff, but didn't even come until this process, until this particular process. So, Tere, wow. Tell us about your dad's maternal line.
So, okay. Hey, Papi, I know you're watching. I love you, and I'm in gratitude that I'm from this line. So we found that we went all the way, what is it, 5 generations up?
Gotta look. So let's count them out. So we have you,
me, then we have Papi, Antonio, then we have Maria Teresa, which is my grandmother. Mm-hmm. Then we have her mother, which is Primitiva. Mm-hmm. After Primitiva, we have Matea. After Matea, we have Sandalia. Mm-hmm. After Sandalia, we have Serapia. And after Serapia, we have Inocencia.
That's right. So you had up to Serapia. When, right? Oh, Sandalia. Sandalia, that's right. So when I started looking and digging and trying to see what I could find, I found Serapia. I found Serapia's husband, who was identified as being born where, Tere?
In Africa.
In Africa.
Natural.
Yes, yes. And then Serapia's, well, I'm getting emotional already. Then Serapia's mother. And that's where we're going to park for a little bit. She's been a real force for us during this process. Absolutely. And Serapia's mother's name was
Inocencia Quiñones.
Inocencia Quiñones. And so this is where I want to look at some of the, here we go. Whoops. I'd be able to see it as well. I gotta share. All right, so we're going to look at one of those documents. So,
wow.
One of the things that we found, well, first of all, let's kick back for a sec. Let's look at this. Carolina, you can see at the very top of your screen, left-hand corner, at the island there, we've got the municipio, or kind of in a US context, it's a county of Carolina. Then you have, they kind of skip cities. So they go straight from like county to community. And so the barrios here, you've got the 13 kind of official barrios of Carolina. And Tere's family, actually, where we find Inocencia is in what used to be its own town called Trujillo Bajo. And Trujillo Bajo got started in the early 1800s. And then in a second, we'll tell you what we found about why it no longer exists. But it became subsumed into what was being formalized to create what is known today as Carolina. And here you can see all those different barrios. So in Tere's family, I found her ancestors, this particular line, very grounded in Trujillo Bajo 200 years ago, 200, and for a good part of the 1800s. Then they shift a little bit over to Oyomula. So Trujillo Bajo is number 8. And then Oyomula is number 3. And don't get confused by the 6, because the 6 is there kind of with a line pointing down. So really number 8 and number 3 border each other. So they just kind of shift over into Oyomulas and are living there in many of the different records. So the earliest record I was able to find for Tere's line was in 1818. And that is a baptismal record for one of Inocencia's children. And here you have it. Now, what's painful about this is that we find Inocencia enslaved. And when her children are being registered, baptized, they're being baptized kind of under the guardianship of the enslaver, because children at this time still legally were born enslaved. It wasn't until I believe 1872 when they did some kind of back, what's the right terminology? When they kind of cleared children that had been born 1868 or later as born free. And so here we are 50 years before that, in 1818, the earliest document I could find. And I don't even know if this was Inocencia's earliest child, but it's the earliest document I could find. And she's being, her son, Esteban, is being baptized here. And so I'll just read a little bit of the content. En este pueblo de nuestra, listen to how they refer to it, en este pueblo, so in the city of Nuestra Señora de la Caridad y San Miguel en Trujillo Bajo. So the name of the city is Trujillo Bajo, really, but they're referring to the church community as its own city. And I see that in these particular records with this church, which no longer exists, unfortunately. I found some later records that said this, some very recent records that said that this church in present time was referred to as San Miguel. So it had lost that whole first part of the Parroquia de Nuestra Señora de la Caridad y San Miguel. So it just retained the San Miguel. Unfortunately, what was left of that particular structure was demolished to create room for the Carretera 66, which is a toll road that connected La 65 Infanteria with La Número 3 and helped you kind of avoid some of the local traffic if you're trying to get out to Rio Grande, El Yunque area. So unfortunately, this church, because I told Tere and I were on a mission, we're gonna go visit this church. We're going up there, we're just gonna like feel that ancestral energy. We wanna be in that space. Like for me and my work with Bomba, it's very important to me to be in the space in which something happened and to feel that energy there, where ancestors of all kinds bled, sweated, cried, like they toiled, they played, they loved, they lived. And so for me, I said, Tere, we are going to this church and we might just, go take a picture one day under La Carretera 66 and be like, here we are, please, like, here we are, ancestors. You're going to see me and hear all the traffic above our heads. But, what's painful is that we find her enslaved, we find her children identified as, and so let's keep reading a little bit. Want to see el día aquí en nombre. Okay, so right here on the second tab, so it starts on the first page and it kind of rolls over to the top of the second page, and you'll see here where it says a quien llame, and I'm sorry, I'm going to pause here for a second. The Spanish colonial government, as all colonial governments do, treat their territories, their colonies as an afterthought, right? There aren't a lot of resources that are put in there, they're exploited, they're depleted of their resources and not really given other resources. And so even though Spaniard contact with the island happened in the late 1400s, it wasn't until the late 1800s, 400 years later, until 1885, when the Spanish colonial government said, okay, now's time, everybody has to start kind of all the municipalities have to keep official records. 400 years before it was required. So church records become the way that, and you can see how they call out the name, they identify the name of the child, because there was no other way to capture this. And so here at the top of the bottom piece, the bottom document, a quien llamé Esteban, hijo natural. Now I'm going to stop here because this is part of an educational series. So I want to educate you for your own process and so you can understand the process that we underwent. When a couple is married, when parents are married, you will see in the records that their children are referred to as legitimate, legítimo. When they are not married, even if they're common law, living in a common law situation, you will find 3 words. So this is for your own research. You will find ilegítimo, which you don't find too often, but you know, there were some insensitive folks who use that term. You find natural, the way you find here, or you find the word which is probably the least common. So natural is the most common one you'll find. Ilegítimo would be the next one. Then the final one would be reconocido. So that means he was born natural too, and then they always name the woman, but the father came and recognized the son. And I've seen in records where fathers won't even list the mother's name. Like to them, it was more important just to recognize the son, and it wasn't really important to mention anything else about that child. You know, we want to talk about like ownership and claiming, like we get back to that icky patriarchal. Can I swear in my own webinar?
Yeah.
You know, like just that bullshit. Like it's just, we see it in the records a lot. All right. So we have Esteban, hijo natural de inocencia. Now, folks have asked me, why is it there with a Y? Why is it with an I in other places? We see other names, Isidra, Isidro, Isabel, Isabela, Inocencia. It's just a preference of the time. And as the preference changes, you see that Irizarry, that last name, you'll just see that a lot. So in your own work, you'll find that. And so her name is identified as Inocencia Quiñones. And then immediately it says, esclava de Don Buenaventura Quiñones. And then it says, fueron padrinos. And then we'll see, you won't see, I'm sorry, actually here, but Tere and I saw in some of these records that some of these names were probably Buenaventura himself, like his own children, his own family members became the padrinos. And again, in a religious context, it's this thing of having a compadre, comadre was really about who's going to stand alongside you and help guide this child in life. In this particular context, I understand this to be in part that, but also because some of the names look like they're probably his children, like this is who will inherit the child, who if I'm not around, this is who you should look to be the guardian of, or the enslaver of. I'm going to stop right here for a second because Tere, I'd like you to just tell us about what we found about her different children, how many children, and what we have come up with as a possible explanation.
Oh man, I appreciate you so much, Mel. So Mel found that Inocencia, my chona, had 11 children. There is a possibility of 13 children. And the last name of those children is Quiñones, which is the last name of the enslaver, right? And so we have come to our own conclusion, and just in spirit, right, Mel, that she was a breeder. And so she had children for the slave owner, so that they could have more slaves, so that he can have more slaves. Mel, I'm gonna add my little piece of how I shifted this story to connect with like how I need to take it in. And I offer this as something to other people, but you know, when you're doing this work, your ancestors are really loud. They start becoming very, very loud. You cannot, you know, for those that believe and for those that don't believe, if you're gonna start tapping into this, prepare yourself, because the messages will show up in ways that you never even knew that existed, that type of connection existed. And so my grandmother had appeared, Maria Teresa, my father's mom, had kind of given me this energy to welcome wellness, welcome her wellness, welcome the wellness of my ancestors. And she said, listen, I need for you to acknowledge the pain that we've experienced. I can't have you honor it. The minute that you start honoring it, you become enslaved also. You start taking on our pain and you can't move our agenda, our lineage agenda forward. I need for you to acknowledge it. I need you to remember us dancing, laughing, you know, being able to be fertile enough to have children, reading, moving into being able to read and write. And so that has given me peace around the fact that my chona, Inocencia, may have just been a breeder for Buenaventura Quiñones, which we'll talk about later at some point, I think, Mel. I don't know, did I answer the question? I'm sorry.
Yes. So, you know, I brought that to Tere as a possibility. I said, look, as I have looked into families at this time, I have not found it to be very common that women who were enslaved had so many living children. And, you know, who knows what all the circumstances around that were, but it's possible. It's possible. And we did shift the energy on that narrative. And we started talking about, just because of like impulses we were feeling about information that was coming to us, people that were coming to us, that we shifted that and said, you know what, this is about bringing all her babies home. This is about like reaching out into the present and just gathering all those babies, all those descendants, and bringing them together to celebrate a lineage, to celebrate a line. So before we move to some of that celebration, I just want to go back. It is difficult. It is difficult to look at this. It's difficult to process, and we've been doing the work, and we've been, you know, phone calls day and night, messages. You saw that it posted something the other day at 3:30 in the morning. I mean, honestly, the energy, when you're involved in the work, it gets really intense. And it taps me out a lot, because I'm not working with just one family. I'm working with so many different families. So folks sometimes will come ask me, can you do my training? I'm like, I can't, I'm sorry, can't. There's only so much I can take on in terms of this like ancestor work, the spirit work. Let's see.
Wait, Mel, real quick.
Yeah.
I have to share with folks, like, you know, when you get into this, you don't think about the genealogist and what it is that they're possibly experiencing, because they're literally the person that is the bridge between you and the stories of your past. And you know, working with you, Mel, has been, I'm exposed to this whole other part of actually doing the work. And so thank you for holding space for my family. I'm really thankful. We're really thankful because it is a lot of work. You have to answer my questions, all of my fears, all of the things that show up for me, and still like move the process forward, because I see why people would get like, people stop doing this work because it's just a lot of emotional and spiritual work. So thank you for like being our altar and holding that for us.
So before I shift, there's just so much material. It's hard to know what to choose, what to pick, I'm a visual person. I love when I can connect content with visuals. But I just want to pause because the name of the enslaver, the way I got to the name of the enslaver actually was through this wonderful resource that was created by my friends at Sociedad Puerto Riqueña de Genealogy. They, what they do is they gather their members and they say, okay, we've decided we're going to tackle this as a theme. So anytime you come across information related to this particular theme, just send it to us. And so this right here, you see how thick this book is? It's called Sociedad Puertorriqueña de Genealogía, Colección de Genealogía y Historia, tomo 3, la aportación de las naciones africanas a la familia puertorriqueña. And so I just looked. I said, Quiñones, let me look. And page after page showed all of these people who had been born in Africa. We're not even talking about all of the other enslaved that were considered criollo who had been born on the island. We're talking about people who had been born in Africa, were tied to a man named Buenaventura Quiñones. And so there were 2 main places. There was San Germán and Carolina. And I said, girl, you people are from Carolina. Like, we need to look into this a little bit more. Who is this Buenaventura Quiñones? And so Tere jumped on it. She found some stuff. I went straight to the archive. I'm now looking for Buenaventura Quiñones and people, tied to him. And that's what we bumped on all of these documents. Now, let me just stop and say, when you're doing genealogy and you're using a service that has other people connected to it, and some of the online services, it's so easy to just go in and click like select all and transfer stuff from one tree to the other tree. But you're not able to connect to the ancestors in that way. Plus, as a researcher, I just don't trust anybody else's research. So I saw that folks had stuff in there. I said, okay, I need to get to the information on my own. And stuff would happen. Like I had this book. I'm like, let me just see if I see anybody in page after page of Buenaventura Quiñones and all of these enslaved people who had been born in Africa. So we found Tere's ancestors, Serapia first, connected with Buenaventura. Then we found Serapia's mom's name, Inocencia, and then this world just opened up of all of these children of Inocencia. And so we're going to look at 2 more records. And one of the things that I said to Tere is, Tere, she was having babies for at least 20 years. Now, that's not uncommon. But it was uncommon, at least in the work that I've done, to find that for a person who had been enslaved. And, we've heard just so many things from other works over the years of how sometimes people didn't want their children to have to live through that experience. And so they did what they could to avoid either having children or bringing a child into the world once they did find out they were pregnant. Other conditions just kind of meant that children didn't even survive. But in this particular case, there's so many branches, so many. So we're gonna look at 2 more and 2 more documents. So she was baptizing children from at least 1818 to at least 1838. And so here's another one that we found. And one of the things that I found in the records, because sometimes you see something and then you read it again, you see something else. You look at it again, you read something else. In this particular record, I already had it, you know, kind of filed away. But a couple of things stood out to me. One is that now they're identifying the color of skin, and I hadn't always been seeing that. And so with this particular one, his name, it looks like an N to me, Anian, but I think in other records, I saw also Adrian. But this baby, it says they identify him as de calidad moreno. And that didn't sit well with me. I just thought maybe this is a period type of vernacular. Maybe it's something very particular to this time when they're talking about skin color, but they're using a word that means quality. And what is that? How are they using that? So you see it says de calidad moreno, esclavo de Don Buenaventura Quiñones, hijo de Inocencia. Now, I don't see the same format in all the records. And all these records are from the same church, Nuestra Señora de la Caridad y San Miguel in Trujillo Bajo. But several of the records, Buenaventura is listed first, before Inocencia, before the mother. And that got me thinking. I said, Tere, I need you to be open to the possibility. And we already know this kind of generally, but for your particular family line, I need you to be open to the possibility that he fathered some of these. And that simple placement of his name before Inocencia's, which would follow a normal birth registry, and I say normal, kind of out of the context of enslavement, but a traditional, let's say that, where a family just comes and baptizes their child. Here, they kind of have him in a position that in a traditional baptismal would be reserved for the name of the father. But instead, that's kind of inserted like esclavo de Don Buenaventura Quiñones, hijo de Inocencia. Now, if you look at the previous one, right away it says Esteban, hijo natural. So it's clear, like she went and had a baby. She had a baby de Inocencia Quiñones, esclavos. So plural, both of them are enslaved too. So you see the difference? So here we see, this is 12 years later. Now it could be a different record keeper. There's so many things you have to think of when you're thinking of genealogy. Like, why doesn't the information flow from the same location source, the same document source, this church? It could be a different record keeper. And they just do things differently. They think differently. They have a different experience. They did record keeping at another church, or this is the way they did it at this church. Who knows? We don't know. All we know is that now we start seeing skin color being identified. We see the Buenaventura's name before, it kind of, in the place where the dad's name would be. And then we see Inocencia's name. And then this is the last baptismal record I see for Inocencia, which is 1838. Isidra Quiñones is the child. So we had Esteban, we had Anian, and then we had now Isidra. And here, if you look kind of in the middle, right where my cursor is, it says, right above that, que nació el día 15 de mayo último de calidad mulata, esclava de Don Buenaventura Quiñones e hija de Inocencia. And then it goes on. So now we're seeing, 8 years earlier, Anian was born. Now, this doesn't mean that she didn't have different partners. It doesn't mean that. But this other thing that just looks off to me is his name before Inocencia's. And now we're seeing, a daughter who's listed as a different shade, color of skin than a previous sibling. And so I just said, Tere, I just need you to be open to, I don't know where that's going to go, but it's just something to consider as we continue moving forward in the process. So, Tere, why don't you share a little bit about what we learned about Buenaventura? And that, well, I'm going to try not to curse. All the words I want to say.
Listen, that Buenaventura is not a Buenaventura. Okay, definitely not. So what we've discovered, and we just looked up the name, and all this information popped up about this person. So Buenaventura was one out of 4 folks that basically was a separatist, a greedy person. He was the owner of a lot, right? And he went against the Spanish government, and in going against the Spanish government, and Mel, you could jump in whenever, going against the Spanish government, they didn't like that very much. And so they ended up hanging him in El Morro.
Right, so there's a record that shows that he and 2 of his brother-in-laws with the last name Vizcarrondo, and I was telling her that the famous Puerto Rican poet from Carolina, Fortunato Vizcarrondo, who wrote one book, Dinga y Mandinga, whose famous poem, Y tu abuela dónde está, everybody quotes all the time, was from Carolina, was from, I started doing his family tree and found that his ancestors were being recorded in la parroquia de Nuestra Señora de la Caridad in Trujillo Bajo. So Buenaventura's brother-in-laws were of the last name Vizcarrondo. So very possible that his own brother-in-laws were the enslavers of this famous poet from Puerto Rico. Tere is a poet, so, you know, feel this ancestral energy coming from this place. It's deep, and it wants to speak. It wants to be heard.
And me, right?
That's right. That's right. So yes, they're trying to it's kind of like some of what's documented with this precursor of El Grito de Lares. Like there's some stuff just happening. Folks are getting sick and tired of the Spanish colonial government. Buenaventura Quiñones is documented as being one of the wealthy landowners in this area. There's a whole list. I sent Tere something the other day, like, oh my gosh, look at this. That is all about Trujillo Bajo. It's like landowner after landowner who's listed in Buenaventura's name and Vizcarrondo. Those are like the top names at that list of wealthy landowners in that area. And he gets caught up in his plan. And they found him hanging in a cell. So he was probably killed. The official record says that he died from suicide in his cell in El Morro, but he was a separatist. And so tyranny was kind of, you know, what he was being associated with. So, I mean, I have to think karma maybe played a little hand right there, but.
Well, yeah, and it definitely, once I read that, there was some ease to my spirit, actually, because, you know, when you think about the possibility that, when you think about what he put, definitely my family through, what they had to experience, you know, there was just some type of ease at, like, some type of justice happened, you know, for my family. And it's pretty powerful because there was a balance, you know, it auto-corrected.
That's right.
It auto-corrected, which gave an opportunity for somebody like me to be here now, or like my grandmother to do what she did. So there's like fuel behind that, as crazy as it sounds, but it's like.
Yep. So I told Tere, I said, Tere, first of all, we got to look into this dude. Secondly, something happens in the 1830s because all of her Inocencia's children are listed as enslaved to him through the 1830s, and something happens like at the end of the 1830s. Sure enough, that same year that Isidra is born and died, the last document we looked at, that's the same year that Buenaventura is kind of found out and hanged. So kind of those clues, they just kept coming to us. We followed them to see where they went. You know, I'm looking at the time. We've got so much to cover. We're gonna have to close the door on this for now. But I want to move forward a little bit to the 1900s, and I want to talk about. what we're finding in terms of some of the written. Let's go back to your Abuela Teresa and how she comes into play here. So tell us who these people are.
So this is, that's my grandmother, Maria Teresa Serrano, an amazing spirit. She's just so powerful. And that is her grandmother, Mama Matea.
So on the right, we have Maria Teresa, and on the left, we have Mama Matea.
Mama Matea. Yeah. And so my grandmother wrote a cuento in, I believe it was 1954, that won an award de Bellas Artes, a short story, which is in a book called Antología de Cuentos Puertorriqueños.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stop screen sharing so we can see it.
Cuentos de la Isla Presente. What are the years? Does it say the years of that?
Well, I know that she won the award in 1954. This particular version was printed in 1980, but she won her award in 54. And she's accompanied by people like Enrique Laguerre, like just some major powerhouses of literature, Black literature, some really important folks. But tell us about this story, because it's special.
So the story that she writes is basically about the experience of her, would it be her great-grandmother, Sandalia, right? Or, yeah, her great-grandmother, Mana Sandalia. It takes place in the barrio, and it talks about a man that comes from, I don't even know how to tell this story fast.
That's okay. I can jump in if you want.
Okay, so it's basically a story that Mama Matea told my grandmother, because Mama Matea died in 1970. So even my dad was raised with Mama Matea. So this is like first person story. My grandmother ends up writing the story that her grandmother tells her about how she was when she was little, how her grandmother was when she was little, and was living in what would be considered the ingenio, right? The story takes place about this man that is brought by this other man into the town. Mana Sandalia had a boarding house, she would take in folk, and she was an entrepreneur within the barrio, and she was like a resource. She was the mama bear of this whole community. She was like one of the eldest in the community when the story takes place. And it talks about this man that comes in from the Virgin Islands, or we really don't even know.
This is Trinidad. His name is Preto Inglés.
You're right. It says it's Trinidad. You're right. And Borinquen, it says it at the end. So he comes in, he works for the ingenio. He ends up going through a whole bunch of experience, and he lives in my great-great-great-great-grandmother's boarding house. And she takes him on like her son. And he's like a really big brother, real stoic. And he's watching as everybody's getting treated. All the slaves are getting treated. They're not getting their pay. The women are dancing under the balcony of the Casa Grande inside of this ingenio. And the African women are, the slaves are dancing, these Black women are dancing, and the coins are being thrown. And that just infuriated him when he was like, what the hell is going on? Why are our women having to do this? So he goes one night, and Mana Sandalia, which is the elder, she was tossing and turning all night, because she's like, this dude has not come home. I know him. He don't like that bullicio of Saturday nights. So she's like, something's wrong. So sure enough, el negro inglés, He
Pretende.
ended up going through the back staircase of where these guys were throwing, the Spaniards were throwing these coins at the Africans, and he's like with the machete, he goes to get them, but he misses, and they end up telling him, like, you better get the hell up out of here because we're gonna kill you. For whatever reason, they didn't kill him. He ends up leaving the, they kick him out of the ingenio, and he ends up, what they say is, he ends up becoming like
A drunk.
yeah,
I mean,
a drunk. Thank you. He ends up becoming a drunk, and they never see him again. But what they remember is his whistle, the sound of his whistle. And they say that the sound of his whistle lives in the ruins of what is that ingenio, that area of the ingenio. So they never saw, for after a while, they just didn't see him anymore, but they could still hear the sound of him, right? And so this is the story that my grandmother ends up writing, but in that, it's really our story. This is our family story. This is really firsthand. Mama Matea was the little girl that's in the story. It says her name. Sandalia is the elder in the story. And so it's really overwhelming. And also, like, even the language within, right, Mel? Like the language that my grandmother chose to, how she wrote it, it was like really preserving the way that they spoke in that time.
so, just to give you a little context, it's written by Maria Teresa Serrano, which somebody asked, what's the name of the school in Carolina? That's the name of the school. The name of the book, somebody asked that, is Cuentos de la Isla Presente. Cuentos de la Isla Presente. She won an award for the story she wrote in 1954. Now, let's give some context. Her own mother, Primitiva, died when Maria Teresa was a young girl. And she was raised by her grandmother, as Tere shared, her grandmother, Matea, who you saw in the picture next to Maria Teresa. In the story, Matea is referring back to Ma Sandalia, Mana Sandalia. And I see some other references. I thought at first that perhaps she was referring to, there was a reference to her mother, but I saw another reference in there. And they're really shortening hermano and hermana. So hermana, Mana Sandalia. So Sandalia, just to give you some context, Maria Teresa dies in she's born in 1925. Sandalia, her great-grandmother, dies a year later, 1926. So we know she didn't hear that from her great-grandmother. Matea is named in the story. Masandalia is named in the story. Primitiva dies when Maria Teresa is a child. So Matea takes over raising Maria Teresa, who hears this story and documents it. And so here now we have an oral history, a family's oral history that is preserved here. It's the storyteller. Is Tere a storyteller, y'all? Okay. The storyteller wins an award for her storytelling. But we've got some other things documented in here, things that I know from something that even there was a Bomba reference that I caught right away. So let's go back. I want to show you a map. And, it's just also important. It's important to kind of understand history. If you've been on any of my other genealogy workshops, I tell you all the time, read, 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 read. It's just important for us to know history so that we can contextualize what we find in these records. So let's go back for a sec. I want you to look at this map. So in the story, the name, we know that the person's name, the enslaver, what was his name? Buenaventura, right? You see that name right here at the bottom of the screen? Buenaventura. If you look where you can see this other area, it's just huge. Number 3 is Oyomulas. What's the barrio right below it? Trujillo Bajo, which would be pretty much at the bottom of the screen here. So this landowner, his name is preserved to this day. This is a contemporary map, okay? So his name is conserved here in Carolina as a neighborhood, maybe not a larger community like a barrio, but it's un sector, una barriada, something bears his name. And then the name of the this like sugar mill, this hacienda, this where they're growing sugar, but where they're processing it in particular, in the story is called Buena Vista. And look right here on this map, Antigua Central Buena Vista. And so Tere, when I sent her this, then she circled it and sent me some stuff back to show me where the school is. And the school is right around here somewhere. Is that right? Like, oh, Villa Fontana, I see it. So this is where the school is. So you see all the connections to the family, how the family's history it just remains. It's documented by the family. It's documented in church records. It's just documented in so many ways. And we're just pulling all these pieces together so we can understand the story. So we are going to take a pause here and we will come back to Tere's work and the work that we've been doing with these ancestors and how beautiful it is. Right now, we're going to go over to Anna's story. So we're going to jump down from Carolina to Aguas Buenas. So what's a cacerola? Who are you going to hit over the head? Buenaventura?
No, we're gonna make coffee. I'm gonna make coffee. Somebody's asking for coffee.
You got it. All right. Coffee break.
Nah.
All right. So let's keep it. Go ahead and make some coffee. You need to make coffee right now?
It'll
Go
be
for it.
fast. I can hear you.
Go ahead. We'll just keep talking then. We got lots to cover, so we have no problem.
That's
So
beautiful. She's taking care of her dad.
I love
He
it.
just turned 93, was it?
90. Her dad turned 92 this week. Some of you may have seen me post that picture. We had a chance to kind of go through the family tree with him right after his birthday. Right, sis? We did that earlier this week.
Yes.
So and that was wonderful. So I want her to tell you a little bit more about that. But so Tere, so let's go back then. I wanna let me see if there's something else here I want to. So with this story, why don't you just tell folks like what is this story before this whole genealogical process? You already had the story. What did that mean to you then? What does it mean to you now?
You can use the regular one.
What did it mean then and what does it mean now? Then, you know, I was just connected to the ancestors that I knew. It was, you know, I never met my grandmother because she transitioned before, but I had a connection to her because it's just, I've been a part of her work, right? And her sisters, Titi Lah, which is the artist name that I use, Lah, which is after Titi Lah, and then Tere after my grandmother. So Titi Lah was like my grandmother because my grandmother wasn't around. So I got to be with Titi Lah. So, and Titi La transitioned also. And then Titi Ilia also transitioned, which was the other sister. So it was the three Serrano sisters. So I had this juicy, delicious relationship and Mayita, which is Primitiva's sister, their aunt. So my great aunt. So I had that deliciousness, right? I was in there, like they loved on me. So thankfully I got to experience that. But what this did, I know, you know, Carolina, you know, Villa Fontana, yeah, my grandmother's school, we're from the Pueblo too, like just what the Pueblo means to me and having them live in the Pueblo, also what it looked like for them to be educators and then transition into the first, you know, one of the first urbanizaciones like El Comandante and what that meant for them, like that they were now a middle-class family from, you know, okay, that's great. I know all of this metropolitan area, great. You jump in, you get there from the airport, I'm in my town already. I don't gotta go nowhere else, right? But then this work put me in a position to start, like I started smelling Puerto Rico differently. you know, you get to the airport and you smell Puerto Rico there. That's an immediate sense that you're like, I llegué. Oh, and it goes into you and you're like, oh, ay, Dios mío, llegué ya. You know, suéltalo.
Clapping, the clapping.
Yo, and your hair starts to stand up. It's like, oh, snap, what?
Yes. So, exacto. So there's that feeling, and I haven't been back, and now with this information that we've been doing these past, almost 5 months at this point. Wow. I haven't been back, but I have been smelling Puerto Rico from here. Like the scents that are happening in my home, the rereading my grandmother's story and understanding it from a perspective of all of these other people and their stories. It has put it, I mean, like, I just know so much more about myself and I understand myself so much more. There's things that I've experienced that I didn't even understand why they were happening to me. And this put it into context as to why I feel the way that I feel about Carolina, what it is that I feel when I am, you know, I'm in the street in Carolina, you know, and I spend a lot of my time in Cano Vanillas, which is where my aunt lives. But to know that the cemetery where Inocencia is literally down the road and we've passed it on La 66, who knows how many times. And I didn't know that my chona and who else is buried there. And so it just now, when I go back to Puerto Rico is never gonna be what it was before. And I'm excited about that. Because now I am like, even when I go to El Morro, right? And I'm in El Viejo San Juan and El Jangueteo with my friends, now I'm in a space of justice. I'm not just at a fort where, colonialism is still like present. It's more like the enslaver was hung here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm good. You know, it just makes me step into being a Black Boricua, an African woman in this space with a lot more, I have more control over my feelings. I feel more, I know I'm gonna feel more, I already feel more situated. I feel more grounded in this space, specifically being a first generation born in the United States. Now I'm not just that gringa. It shifted. This information shifted like what I feel, and it makes sense that I've been fighting for Puerto Rico, you know, to be independent since I can remember. It makes sense. I've really been fighting to be able to get to this story. I've been fighting for the Puerto Rican political prisoners for 20-something years, right? And now I get to see that in that fight, it was really about me fighting to be able to tell this story. Isn't that amazing?
It is. It is. And I have to say, like, just even you introducing me to the story that she wrote is so wonderful. Hola. El cumpleañero.
Sí, felicidades. She's beautiful.
To interrupt, but he was like, what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing over there? I was like, okay, sit down.
That's right. I love it. I love it. Okay, before we move on to Anna's story, I just want to touch on one thing. So for Bomba enthusiasts, when Tere introduced me to this story that her grandmother wrote, that is of their family's oral tradition, that documents real happenings in a real place, real people in a real place, I saw a name, and I'm going to invite my friend Jose Cepeda, who is a critical resource right now for Bomba history and well into the future. So I'm going to invite him to come on. Whoops, I think I invited the wrong person. I'm sorry. Nope. I'm sorry. There we go. Jose Cepeda. Jose, here in this story, si puede quitar el mute, Jose, I'm just going to read something. Bajo su techo ha vivido el extranjero. So we're talking about Mana Sandalias in her boarding house. Ha vivido el extranjero desde aquella tarde en que llegó al ingenio. A la anca de Signor Damián del Corre Costa. Jugador de profesión que hacía esporádicas apariciones en el barrio. So when I saw that term Corre Costa, I recalled an ongoing conversation I had with my really great friend, Jose. José, si puede quitar el mute para educarnos sobre quién era el correcosta.
Sí. Buenas tardes, ¿me escucho?
Sí.
Saludos antes que nada, saludos Teresa, Ana, saludos Melanie, a todos los que están presentes. Pues mira, a través de la educación que hemos tenido en las libretas de mi abuelo Rafael Cepeda, encontramos que abuelo está mencionando al correcosta. Dice que el correcosta era un hombre que se conocía desde Cangrejo, ahora Santurce, todo Cangrejo, hasta Humacao. Todos los pueblos que tenían que ver toda esa área, ahí estaba el correcosta, dándole el nombre de Luis Franco o Luis Calcaño, que era como lo conocían. Decía que tenía muchos hijos, algunos los reconoció, otros no, y por ahí pues él era cuentista, hacía cabos de velorio, y fue una persona bien conocida en toda esta costa, Carolina, Loíza, Río Grande, hasta Fajardo, Macao, era conocido en toda esa área. Y muchas de todas las personas que cuentan historias que tienen que ver con estas áreas, siempre hablan del correcosta. De hecho, lo llamaban el correcosta y algunos le llamaban el andarín, que hay una bomba que se llama andarín, que nosotros la cantamos, que dice, ahí corre, andarín. Y andarín, pues era este hombre, porque él corría todas las costas por lo menos toda esta costa desde Cangrejo hasta Humacao.
Y esa canción está documentada en las grabaciones, en las grabaciones del antropólogo John Alden Mason, que él grabó en Loíza entre los años 1914 a 1915. So, aquí tenemos tantos recursos que están oh my goodness, confirmando esta información que escribió María Teresa Serrano en su cuento El Castigo. So, gracias, José.
Gracias.
Un abrazo.
Gracias a todos. Y quería decirte que la parte del ingenio donde ella está hablando, todavía hay un área entre Oyomula y Buenaventura que sí se llama Ingenio. Esa área ahí le llaman Ingenio, que es la que pega para Buenaventura, lo poquito que queda del barrio, con Oyomula, que ahora está Villa Esperanza ahí, todo eso es el área de Ingenio, que conectaba con Trujillo Bajo. Una aportación. Gracias.
Gracias.
Un placer conocerla.
José,
Y su historia
gracias.
Gracias,
su familia.
José, que tengan buen día. Gracias.
Gracias, corazón.
Gracias. Wow.
So, further corroboration, that's what I was trying to find in Spanish. Corroboration. This is not just a story that she made up. This is oral history that was preserved in the family. It was documented, and now we're able to corroborate other pieces of it. Somebody wrote in the chat that their father was named El Correcosta también. So in the case of the Womba, we can at least date, not only we can date the story, because we know Masandalia died in 1926. So the story had to have taken place before then. We know that in Loíza, right next to Carolina, right next to Oyomula, is probably the closest to Loíza, the closest piece of land. There's a song recorded in 1914 to 1915 about a correcosta that they called El Andarín. So all of this beautiful material that's kind of coming together, that we're able to connect just because it is the time and the place to do so. All right. Ahora vamos con Ana. So, Ana, I'm gonna ask you to take off your mute, Ana.
By the way, my sister's name is Carmen. I'm sorry that I did not introduce her. Carmen Socorro Garcia. Vicente Garay Garcia. So I'm sorry that I only introduced myself. My bad.
That's okay. Listen, you know how excited I am that they are here with you on the panel. I love this. We're doing ancestor work, and we have right here family. Family's part of this whole process. It is family has been part of their process as well too. They even renamed me and everything. Yes, well, when we get back to DNA, we're going to talk about my new name.
I want to know the new name.
We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about my new name when we get to DNA. So, right, Anna, so we're gonna now get over to your family, and we're going to talk about your experience in this process. So why don't you share with us, what did you know before, and what do you know now? So let's start with what you knew before this process.
So unlike Tere, I really did not know much about my family, and my sister here can corroborate.
Yes, I don't either.
You know, whenever we would ask our elders, they would say, no, esa gente no cogieron foto, no escribían nada, no escribían. So, you know, we were able to hear names, pero que tampoco hablaban mucho. Like, they wouldn't really, those names wouldn't be always in circulation. When we would go to visit, right, Puerto Rico, we knew abuela, abuelo, although they died when I was little. And then abuela and abuelo weren't interested in talking about their abuelos and abuelos. It was like, we got to work and we got things to do. Y tu tía está enferma, o este nene necesita ir a la oficina, whatever. What and particularly my desires, I was always taking pictures. If there's one thing you know, right?
Yes.
Desde que yo era chiquita con la cámara, those little flat 110 cameras that you
With
have to
the
put
little
flash
cube.
on. Yes. Yo siempre con mi camarita, people thought I was going to be a photographer, pero era un interés que yo tenía, right? It was an interest that I had to find out about that other life on an island, because I'm here in Manhattan, like, you know, buildings are burning, you know, crack, AIDS, like this is a whole nother thing. And then over there, you got pigs, cows, land.
Yes.
And our families were big.
Horses, yes, they
So on my
were.
mother's side,
Numerous.
they had 10 kids, 9 kids, you know, my aunts hit my father's side, 15 kids. So, you know, for me to go there with pictures, it's because it's like a whole universe. Pero que cuando yo preguntaban, I didn't get much. I totally didn't get much. So I come into this at a zero pretty much. I know el nombre de la mamá de papi. I know that. I know his dad. I know the woman who raised him, because some incidents happened and he ended up becoming an orphan. I know my mother's father and my mother's dad. And y ahí se acaba.
So that's
it.
like 6 people. I was counting. That's like 6 people that you know.
Right. And that's it. Because when I asked for pictures or what school they went or where they came from, ay, chica, no, eso, we don't know. Nadie sabe. Así que cómete la vianda y los guineitos and let's go, you know, visit your cousin. Vamos al pueblo y ayuda con la funda de arroz. Yeah. And then again, like I think Tere said earlier, you go to Puerto Rico and you're labeled the gringa, you know? And so, ¿por qué esta gringa tiene tanta pregunta?
Imagine us.
What does she want? You know? Nosotros estamos aquí, estamos bien, aquí vienes tú. Mira, que yo quiero saber que qué barrio.
Sí.
You know, sit down, eat your bananas and your, you know, little stew, and we'll pick you up and take you where you need to go. You know? Like, so unfortunately, I come to this with very little information. And I want to also say that not only do I honor the African side, I honor a European side, because we both saw grandma. My mother's side was white with like pelo lacio. And I honor the indigenous, which my father's side is very Taino looking. But my mother's father is an Afro-Rican, like tried and true. And, you know, when I look at people in my family, I see it. So I'm open-minded, open-hearted, ready to learn. But I know that Melanie, we started 3 months ago. So
6 months ago.
Right, November or something like that. So I'm not, you know, completely sold that I'm gonna find out everything today. But I'm excited and open and humble. And I got these 2 people with me also excited.
So now tell me what you feel, or share, like, that's where we started. Where have we landed? And like I said at the beginning, we're at the front end of this. We're going to be on this journey together for years to come. So where are we today?
Well, today, you know, you did a presentation for my dad for his birthday, and it really hit home. So thank you. From the minute that you started giving me names, Melanie, I have felt a presence. I feel like these people are now standing, they're walking with me, they're dancing with me. It's an unbelievable sense, un sentido que yo tengo, de que hay una presencia and these names, who knew? You know, I always light a candle. We always pray for his mom who died at childbirth, or we prayed for, you know, a lot of people that we know have passed. Pero ahora, you know, tengo como una legión. It's like a legion of people and names that are circulating that I didn't have before. So I feel very accompanied at a time where I have felt very alone. So many of my family members have all passed because my mother was the 9th child. I'm the last child, her last child. Everyone is older. So thank you for giving me a feeling of being accompanied. That I can't put money to that.
Of course. And and you are, and it's amazing. And I think the world has seen the fruit of that. And now you're just able to name those names. And now you're able to understand, you know, more about who these folks are. So let's show you. I love maps. I love the visuals, but let's start. So she named about 6 people. We've already done this a couple of times now. Ana and I have looked at the tree together. We looked at it with her father, Don Vicente. And I'm just looking here at my tree here. So I've got at least the tree that I have built in the last 6 months. I've got, if Ana's the first generation, I've got it going back 7 generations. 7 generations now of ancestors.
And that's amazing because people would say, no, eso no hay record. And clearly
There was, you found.
you found, so hay record.
Tú estás sentado, tú no estás sentado.
Estoy sentada.
Okay, okay.
Uh-oh, it's on mute. Ana, you went on mute somehow.
Oh, okay. No,
Okay.
I'm just saying that you're amazing that you can find those generations where in my family, we were not convinced that anybody went down to a registro, and you know, it's like there wasn't a value for it. So thank you.
Well, I think the most beautiful thing to come out of this is what you said, is you are not alone. You are not, all these ancestors behind you, all of this family yet to be discovered. And so we had some interesting things that we found on Ana's line too. So just to kind of trace that line back, so Don Vicente, who's with us, we're so blessed to have him on the call with us. Don Vicente just celebrated his 92nd birthday today, this week, excuse me. He has 2 last names. So Ana is Ana Garcia Falcón, and Don Vicente is Vicente Garcia Garay, and you heard her mention that name already. I'm bringing emphasis back to it because Garay is the line that I went the furthest on. And with that one, I got to about the late 1700s on that line. And so if we just name out from his mother, we have, and you know, I think this is a beautiful moment to just name those ancestors. So Ana, are you okay with that? And just move forward and name them all, because I feel like we have to, because you went from 6 to a legion, like Tere said recently this week. I think of what she posted on Facebook. We've got legions behind us of ancestors. So on Don Vicente's line, we have Natalia Garay Segarra, daughter of Marcos Garay Medina, son of Eduardo Garay Carrasco, son of Pablo Garay y Sosa, son of Isidoro Garay and Matias Sosa, going back to the late 1700s. And then yes, you have ancestors for days and family yet waiting to be discovered. So on that Garcia line, we have Don Vicente Garay, Garcia Garay. We have his father, and he made sure I had the right name. Right?
He corrected you.
Yeah, he was like, I'm not hearing it, I'm not seeing it. And we had it, Santos Tomás Garcia Torres, his father. And then from there we move on to who was the son of Lorenzo Garcia Garcia, who was the son of Cornelio Garcia Garcia and Leonor Garcia. So we just have generations of ancestors who have made themselves known in the records. When we went through the tree with Don Vicente, he's like, yeah, I heard that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I know. And so, and Ana has just been telling me for months, like, every time we make some progress, she shares it, it triggers memories for him. He's 92, y'all. Like, he's got some memories. He's got decades of memories, and this process has helped trigger some of those memories. And she's been able to confirm lots of things that we heard, and that we found in the records. Then when we did the tree with him, when we went through the tree with him, he also confirmed a lot of information and gave just contextual detail, which for me, contextual detail is everything. Like, we have to, if you see, what did we see on these maps? Like, look at how close Oyamula is to Trujillo Bajo, and Buenaventura, it was part of Trujillo Bajo. We can see it as a neighborhood in there, and just all of this other information. So let's look at some information here for Ana or La Roca. All right. Okay.
No, pasate acá.
Yeah.
Acá va a estar un mapa.
Ana Garcia Falcón, La Roca, she's gonna go ahead. So let's take a look at this map. So just like with Tere, like when I first started talking to Roca about her family tree, she's like, I'm from Aguas Buenas, punto. Like, period. That's it. Se acabó.
Because that's all I knew. That's, you know.
No. But all the records show that was true. Like, your family has been in Aguas Buenas for like at least 200 years. So it's not that it's just all you knew, it's the truth. Like, your family is from Agua Buena. So I looked at the records. We don't have a lot of diversity of dates. Why? Because these folks are grounded in these communities and these branches, particularly. Why don't you tell us, Ana, where in Aguas Buenas is your family like really concentrated?
When we
Eso
were,
fue cuando fundaron esos estados, esos barrios.
no, eso, I'm not sure what the dates are. He wants to know what the dates are there for Juan Asensio, Mulitas. Is that when they were established?
No, I went through your family tree and I looked for different dates. I looked for diversity because I wanted to show what your family's footprint was.
Uh-huh.
What
So
your
he
family's
said Tio
footprint.
Cruz. He just said Tio Cruz lived in Mulitas.
Viste? I love
And
this.
that's
This is
his
exactly what
uncle.
happened the other night.
That so you're already triggering stuff, you know. I didn't know about Mulitas,
Me neither.
right?
So I
No,
found an ancestor, and if you look at the map, these 4 communities are all along the top of the municipio. Juan Asensio, Mulita is just like a little tiny barrio, Sonadora, and Jagüeyes. But Ana, tell us, where is your family grounded?
It's in a place called La Mesa, which is, they called it that because it was flat and high above El Pueblo, where the plaza is, you know, La Plaza Central and Aguas Buenas. And so La Mesa is part of Jagüeyes, which is. Mhm. Sumidero. He's naming places where his cousins and family lives. And so whenever Bayamoncito, he's got family there. Okay. And so right. And so basically they're mountain people. There's rivers. Aguas Buenas is already, it tells you that it has a lot of tributaries, a lot of brooks going through it. And Bairoa, okay, he's saying he's got family there too. And so we thought that it was just there. You know, my mother's family is by La Torre and my dad's family is by this valley, a little more like to the east. And so these 2 families met, they're agricultural families, and, you know, so that's all we knew. I knew I had an uncle, ¿verdad? In Caguas, Pepito, right? Y Regina. And, you know, everybody kind of dispersed, but that's why when you asked me, I was like, oh, no, Aguas Buenas, Jagüeyes, La Meja. That's it. That's it. So all of this that you're writing here is eye-opening because it does spread like tentacles. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. And if you notice, Ana, like all of the surrounding municipios, did we find those in the records? Pretty much.
Yeah, we did. And he just mentioned Sumidero and Caguitas, which I had not heard before.
Those barrios, yeah, those barrios. So pretty much your family's from like every barrio. Has lived in every barrio of Agua. Y'all are from Agua Buena, just to confirm what you already told me from the get. Punto. Se acabó. But you do have some ancestors that came from some other places. So I just was combing through the records to see what kind of diversity within the municipio your family had. And there's such an anchor in Jagüeyes. Jagüeyes is such an anchor for your family. Juan Asensio, there were a few others, but you've even mentioned to me very consistently throughout our process, a mile marker, which in Puerto Rico, especially if your family's from the mountains, these mile markers serve as kind of an address. So tell us.
Mami always talked about el kilómetro 4. ¿Verdad? El kilómetro 4.
Sí.
El kilómetro 4 es donde Mami pretty much was raised, in a wooden house. I tried to find photos, Melanie. I couldn't find it in my mother's album, so I'm sorry about being excited about it.
This is the beginning of the process. We got a ways to go, sis.
It's true. And so el kilómetro 4, every now and then, Mami would ask my cousin Juanín, who just passed. Lolo, a brother of my mom, would take us there, and we, she'd get off the car and she'd take a look, and of course the wooden house is no longer there, but they had some acres there. And so then we get back in the car and drive off. But el kilómetro 4 was very important for her because it's where, as the 9th child, the last child, those were her stomping grounds.
So I'm glad that's a great segue, because while we looked at your dad's family, we actually spent some good time in your mom's family too, right? And in particular, we looked at your mom's dad. Tell us about your mom's dad.
Mom's dad was an Afro-Rican, and he had, from what I heard, from the stories that I heard, fell in love with this woman, Josefa, and they were both working out of this, I don't want to say plantation, because they never said plantation. It was like an hacendao, una hacienda that he worked at. And that at one point when he wanted to marry Doña Josefa, they kind of got suspended from working there. And he went and got, land at Kilómetro 4. And so from there, he served in a war. I believe it was the First World War, got injured, got a pension, and then moved from Kilómetro 4. By then, his children were kind of big, but my mother being the 9th and the 2 younger ones went to move to this other place in Aguas Buenas. So she was able to grow up in a concrete house. She was able to experience electricity and car and a radio. So she was the 9th child to kind of experience her father getting into this very high status because he had money because of the war. So a Black man in Puerto Rico who now had money, had land, and basically, as we saw in the record, had his own business, Productos Falcón.
I got it for you. I got to hear the show.
That was eye-opening. I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that. You brought that to us.
Yes. So I love this story because what do we hear? We're gonna look at a couple of things, but right away she identified him as Afro. Right away, we hear about land ownership. But so that's exciting. That's exciting in the research to come across this stuff we already know, stuff we carry, right? That we carry, but that is maybe not part of our family narrative. And I'm gonna show you why. I'm going to show you the audience why and why some of these stories in our families, those of us from Puerto Rico, how this Black ancestry becomes invisible in the records and how the family story then is affected by that invisibility. Okay. And it happened in my family, even though I carry, my ancestors in just a tiny visible way, but but in terms of the oral history, somehow some of that gets erased. So let's look, because I want to sit with this Black land ownership in Puerto Rico and how that becomes invisible. So let's get to know her grandfather, Miguel Falcón Concepción. And we're gonna, what did I say is the very first thing she said about her grandfather? He was a Black man. And so when you see on this draft card, and we know for all the for World War I, World War II, and Vietnam, like draft cards were required of all men of an eligible age. And so if you look at the right side of your screen, it's dated in July of 1917. And already this Black man, his ancestors are being made invisible. Because right here, if you look at Raza, right where my cursor is, what does that say?
Caucásico.
Caucásico, sí.
Okay, Tere, all right, like how? What?
Yeah,
Exactly.
And then you asked
Exactly.
my dad, right? You asked my dad, papi, el papá de mami.
De mami.
Ajá, era blanco.
Y el Falcón.
Ajá, era blanco.
¿Ah?
Era blanco.
¿Era blanco?
Te estoy preguntando.
¿El papá de quién?
Mami,
No, era de color.
thank you. So he knows. So it's just one of those things where it's
Era de
like,
color.
era de color, right? Trieño, right? And so here you have him as Caucásico in 1917, before my
Mhm.
mother's born. So it's, yeah, one of those things like, what?
And I didn't include it, but I think if I remember, we went through the tree a couple of times, and I think in the 1910 census is the last time we see him as visibly Black in the records. 1910. So you can see he was
Wow.
born in the mid 1800s, 1894 here. It says 1910 is the last time he's visibly Black in the records. By 1917, what Ana said, that he wanted to get married, and that in order to get married, he had to kind of boost his social status for the community because he was marrying a white-skinned woman. And I say white skin because I've done enough genealogy to be able to tell you, even when you identify somebody as your tree as a white ancestor, sometimes they have the closest connection to Africa. I have found that.
Wow.
So here, he wanted to marry a white-skinned woman. He went and bought land. And look, in 1917, he's already, his social standing, you see that in the records. So I worked on a family where in the records, the man, just pretty identical to this, the man was Black in the earliest records. He goes to fight in the First World War. He becomes mulatto. When he comes back and he has a pension and buys property, he becomes blanco. And the same person, I just followed that trajectory. And it's in here, he goes straight to Caucásico. Caucasiaco. Something like that, whatever. Some conjugation of white in Spanish. So here we see this, but we already start to see that evidence of that social standing kind of moving along the color ladder. Here we see the actual color, but then we also see evidence of why. And so if you look, I gotta find it and see. He is a trabajador en finca agrícola. Then the very next line is trabajo con productos Falcón. His name, Miguel Falcón. He works for a landowner whose company name is Producto Falcón. And so we already have now some land ownership. And Ana, we didn't get a chance to look at this document the other day, but this is a 1935 agricultural census.
No se ve.
So this, it's hard to read. It's hard to read. I'm gonna work through it for you. I'll zoom in. So this is an agricultural census from 1935. You only appeared in this census if you owned agricultural land. And so I've worked with families that say, but how is it possible we're not in that census? Like my family owned land. If your family was in between purchasing and buying, selling, and they happen to not own it on the day that they came by with the census, they were not recorded. That's how censuses work. In that year, in that time frame, in that month, in that week that they go by to record, you know, the land ownership has to be in the family at that time. So let's just take a look and see what this Black farmer had on his land in Aguas Buenas. So you can see here it says patatas. He had café. He had tabaco. Yep, Anna's raising her hand. She remembered some of this. Arroz. He had habichuela. He had ñame, which my Maldonado branch is from the mountains, and ñame grows in the mountains. If you know that about Puerto Rico, it does not grow on the coast. It grows in the mountains. It needs a cooler climate. And then he also had guineos. He had a lot of guineos.
Oh, a lot of guineos.
Yeah.
Platanales, platanales.
So, you know, whoopsie. This Black landers ownership is being erased as being Black. That agency that we have in the records for Blackness, Black entrepreneurship, Black wealth is lost in the records. And Anna mentioned that her mom was one of the last children, or was one of the first children to go live in a concrete structure, right? And so her mom is part of that transition time for the family when they're building that wealth in the family, and when they're able to move from a wooden house to a concrete house. My grandmother was born in the 1920s. She was born and raised in a bohío on the coast, and her grandmother was of slightly more means and lived in a wooden house. So just some perspective, kind of at the same time that in your family, they're transitioning from a wooden house to a concrete house, my family's just transitioning from a bohío, a plant-based home, completely plant-based home, to a wooden home. You know, and that's just kind of how the social structure across the island. And people were living in bohíos up through the 50s in different parts of the island. So the fact that your family, your grandfather, who's Afrodescendiente, not only is they're not even using bohíos. They had a wooden house, and they moved from a wooden house to a concrete house. Just speaks so much about Black land ownership and Black wealth in this community that has been made invisible because of how his wealth accumulation meant that in the records, they didn't want to acknowledge that as possible for Black people, for Afrodescendientes. And so this becomes invisible. And it's just why it's so important to go back to learn this, so we can retell the story and we can tell it correctly, and we can, you know, create visibility in the archive where there isn't, and change our
And
family
also
narratives.
there's also like a sadness, you know, with the way that the economy was broken by the American capitalism that came in. So right here you have, you know, grandpa growing food, selling food, right? Family eating food. We don't need the supermarket.
That's right.
We don't need it. And so there's like a frustration and a sadness on my father's side and my mother's side's families, where we can't be self-sufficient anymore.
Right.
And so all the information that my dad still has about, you know, la fase de la luna, you know, lunar cycles, when to plant, all of that, how to deal with maybe certain viruses that attack a tree or whatever, it's lost. All
Ancestral memory. Yes.
Yeah, it's valueless because a government came in and said, no, you're gonna go to the supermarket. No, don't plant a thing. We'll give that to you. And so, you know, there's like a sadness that exists in my family that I have felt regarding how I have masterful people in my family who were now told, sit down, stay at home, welfare, or tanti quieto. It's a sadness. And so when I read these things, I'm like, wow, we were on our way, because every member of the family could sell their piece of land, take that money, go by in Humacao or go be somewhere else in Bayamón and be fulfilled, be professional people, you know, and yes, Tere, and acknowledge their wellness, you know, acknowledge the fact that they learned from their great grandparents, you know, about the moon cycles and, you know, when to plant and how to, you know, cure tobacco. You know, my father's side had a lot of tobacco as well. I don't know that. I can't even, you know, I don't even know when to drop a seed into the land. So, right, there's a lot of that sadness. So thank you, because this uplifts, it uplifts me away from the sadness that there's all this knowledge that somebody considered unimportant and valueless. So thank you.
Yes. And like I said, now they had agency that was stripped of them in the records. And now we're reclaiming that agency for our ancestors so that we can retell their stories, so that we can say, you can say, I come from a line that was developing Black wealth in the interior, where the narrative, the popular narrative in Puerto Rico is that los negros vivían en la costa y los blancos en el interior, right? So it's even rewriting that narrative, that Black and white narrative about Blacks lived on the coast, whites lived in the interior. And we're just disrupting all of this, all of these narratives that support a colonial narrative, they support a patriarchal narrative, they support a male chauvinistic narrative. And we're just disrupting all of this by just getting in touch with the ancestors in this way and you know, waiting to see what it is that is for you to learn. So we'll just look at this. I'm going to show something here and then we'll go back. But look, here he is again, 1942, second draft card that he's filled out. What do you see right away? He lives in Barrio where? Jagüeyes, where they just have such an anchor. Their family has lived there for so many generations. And where does he work? Finca propia, his own land. And so the fact that he's in the 1935 census, 7 years before that, speaks to that as well. He was a landowner. We already know that. We already know something was in transition in 1917 when it said that he worked for Productores Falcón. So something was in transition, but by 1935 for sure, he's a landowner. He's captured as such. Here he self-reports as such, as finca propia. Ana, why don't you tell us about that little cross at the bottom of the document?
So my mom, before she left Puerto Rico to make a life with my father, being the last one, being the one that learned how to read and write, she became sort of like the manager towards the end of her time in Puerto Rico of my grandfather's, you know, financial dealings, or, you know, she was the one that was there. And occasionally, you know, whenever I would ask her, or you would ask, right, you know, como era abuelo, you know, I'd always say the best things, but she would say, no sabía leer ni escribir, you know, and she said, you know, yo le ayudaba, pero siempre él filmaba con una X o una cruz. So, and she said, and in those times, that would suffice. That was sufficient. Tú no necesitabas, sabes, una persona que era, you know, educada. As long as you know how to deal, you know, finances and work with politicians, you know, and he did. So that little, when you see that little cross right there, or in some papers, I guess an X, that's my grandfather's signature. That's my grandfather's signature. And so it was very touching, and it's very emotional to me to know that this person was never, you know, thought of as worthy of teaching to read or write, and that his last child would help him and honor and not make fun of him, and always say, "Tú tienes que firmar aquí."
And he fought for this country.
Right, and he was, yeah, he was in the military and everything. They didn't feel like that was going to obstruct him from serving, right, being a person who can't read or write. But when I see these X's or these crosses, it's emotional to know that that's his mark. He left his mark on that piece of paper, and somebody else signed his name. But it's just beautiful, and it's very emotional.
So So it's already 4 and we could just be talking here for hours. I want to move to the DNA part quickly because you know the purpose of this series was to, not that we're dishonoring our other ancestors, but we're choosing to create space for ancestors that are often overlooked, who are made invisible, who are removed from different narratives. The key element of who they were in the society at the time that they were living is kind of removed. And so that the purpose of this series, or this part of the series, is to celebrate that, to look at that more closely, and then to think about the ways in which these things have kind of moved forward. Look, Roka is an entrepreneur, okay? She comes from a line of Black entrepreneurs of who took like what they could, what they had in their environment, and made it work to support themselves and their families. And this is, you know, the idea was to look and see, like, how do these ancestors echo forward into the lives of these participants, these panelists. And so we've seen that for both of them. We've seen how both, you know, how they've carried on without even realizing, without even knowing, in so many ways, many of the aspects of that defined their ancestors of their lives. I want to move now to DNA testing, so we can talk about this a little bit. There are 2 main types of DNA testing, and we talked about this in the other panels. Autosomal is what most folks are interested in. What's my genetic makeup? Like, what percentage am I of this, of that, of the other? That's autosomal, or what's called admixture testing. The majority of folks who are looking for a DNA test, that's what they're looking for. And usually their work stops there. They don't do a lot of this archival stuff, or they might go in and like draw documents or pictures from other people's trees, and then they let it rest and they feel satisfied. We're trying to use haplogroup testing because we want to look at some things. We want to look and see how can, when the records end, which in a lot of places they didn't even begin in Puerto Rico until what year? 1885. But when those documents end, how can we go back further? And so DNA testing is that next step in a lot of ways. Now, haplogroup testing means your oldest DNA on your maternal line or your paternal line. So I have another image so we can make this a little more clear. So with haplogroup testing, if you're thinking about a family tree, you're thinking about starting with yourself, then you add your parents, then you add your 4 grandparents, then you add all your great grandparents, and so on. Haplogroup testing only tests for a male. They are XY, so they can test the paternal line or the maternal line. Women, we are XX, so we can only test our female. So, and it's the mother of the mother of the mother of the mother, or the father of the father of the father of the father. So nobody in the interior are we able to test ourselves, for men or women. They cannot test. So if you look at the center image, the center like column where it talks about autosomal testing, that just, what is your mix? What is your percentage of this, that, or the other? Haplogroup, which both of our panelists did their own autosomal testing. And it confirms pretty much what they knew about their families. They were mixed. Their families are mixed, and they were able to understand that a little bit better. But in particular, what we were looking for were testable lines that would lead us back to Africa. And we found what we think could be on both lines. And in Tere's case, if you remember at the beginning, we mentioned Julian, who, well, I don't know if I mentioned his name, but Julian was Serapia's partner with whom she had children. Julian's listed as having been born in Africa. Unfortunately, we don't have access to a son of his, and then a grandson and a great grandson. So it has to be that straight male line all the way down. We don't have access to that. Tere herself because we're focusing on her dad, so her dad can test his male line or his female line. Tere's dad tested, and that is Maria Teresa's, who's the daughter of Primitiva, who's the daughter of Mateo, who's the daughter of Sandalia, who's the daughter of Serapia, who's the daughter of Inocencia, and we're testing to see where that line goes. COVID has disrupted a lot of processes just everywhere. And unfortunately, we don't yet have those results back, even though we should have had them back over a month ago, about a month and a half ago. We just don't have those back yet. So we're being patient. It's coming. And, I think that because of the interest of even some other panelists on previous and upcoming panels to test, that we'll probably do a follow-up panel, like an update, here's where everybody's at, kind of panel down the road, so we can capture, because some people just weren't ready to test when their panel came up, or in some cases like this. So we're excited. We're at the edge of our seats, and we're just waiting because we know that at least 2 generations there were enslaved, and we have that information. And so the logical kind of trajectory is that it would lead back there, but there can be a disruption. And if just one mother along that line is white or mixed, Taína, whatever, even though the rest of her descendants are all visibly Black, that haplogroup won't reach there. And so, but we're open. We're open to whatever comes from that. So we're waiting. And then on Anna's line, we did get a maternal haplogroup for Anna. Anna, do you remember? Do you want to share about that?
No me acuerdo. So please help me.
So A2.
Right, A2. Okay, sorry.
Right, that's okay. That's okay. So Anna's came up A2. I'm also what's called a mutation of the A. So all the haplogroups start with a letter. Then each mutation of that haplogroup has another letter or digit added to it. So Anna, much like my great aunt and Utuado, is A2, which is kind of a more direct lineage and is considered a First Nations haplogroup. So Anna, in Puerto Rico, we have a lot of our First Nations end up as A haplogroups or C haplogroups. I'm also A, that usually corresponds to the Arcaicos, who were the pre-Taínos, the people who were in Puerto Rico before the Taínos. So that's, Anna and I share that kind of ancestry in common. Interestingly enough, I see Miriam. Miriam is also A2. I'm a mutation of that, so I am A2K1. The pre-Taínos Arcaicos, the archaics. If you look that up, you'll find the archaics. And when Ancestry.com first provided their DNA breakdown, they would call that Native North America. As Taínos, we know come from the Amazon basin and are considered Native South America. But the archaics, they tend to genetically be closer to the Seminoles of Florida and the DNA found on the North American continent. Interestingly enough, I think I saw that Niandino said that Tere came up as a DNA match for her. Niandino came up as a DNA match for me. Tere came up as a DNA match for me, right, Prima? Hey, Prima. I need to check. Now that I think about it, I need to check Anna. We're waiting on a DNA test for Anna too. We found the line that we think we'll be able to test in Anna's family, so we're going to look at that for the future for African ancestry. So this is just the beginning, everyone. This is just the beginning. There's so much work to do. The ancestors have been, like Tere says, so loud and just leading, guiding, sharing messages, like pointing us in different directions. It's been amazing. I see Jasmine says amazing. It has been amazing. So that's Tere and Anna, do you want to share? I know Anna's gonna go check on something really quick. But I just want to open up this time. If you want to share any last thoughts before we take questions. You can go ahead and
No,
unmute.
I'm really happy to have found out everything that you have investigated. I know I'm still waiting, like you said, for a couple of things that will bring me even deeper, a deeper dive. So I'm totally, you know, grateful, gratitude, humbled, feeling connected. Some of my family members are on, so I hope that they stayed on, Lucy, and I have more information now to offer my cousins in Puerto Rico who may not have thought there was any record of anyone. So thank you again for opening the door. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course.
Wow. Number one, I'm really happy that I was able to go through this experience with Rokafella. You know, and that we represent hip hop. And so it's really cool that this is how the lines are right now. They're in this genre, or right in this culture. We're a part of this culture. And it's really exciting that and as women within this culture, that we're adding like this extra voice, and we're not just saying, oh, our ancestors, or like ancestral this, and no, it's really like living it out. And that is so exciting. So I just want to state that it takes a lot of bravery and vulnerability to put yourself in a position to find out about your family, because you don't know what you're going to find out. And I just want to encourage people to do it, try it, do the work, try to figure it out. Watch the YouTubes to at least learn how to do the basic stuff. You know, I have a few friends that have been doing this work. Mel, this is a blessing. You know, you've blessed our family in a way. And like you said, the tentacles, I think you said it best. You said the tentacles. And I have a few primas and some tios, and, you know, that I really haven't super connected with, but they did take on, you know, the little message that I sent, like, can you jump on? And to see them there and have them asking questions. Like, I got primas that I have never hung out with that are on this. And I know as soon as we see each other, it's like, they're able to smell what I smell too, and like feel what I feel too. And that the context, like, it changes. Everything changes from this moment on. And so it takes bravery though, you know, to try to find your authentic self, period, let alone, you know, in this world, let alone like start finding out how dope and deep our story goes, and like those authentic stories, though, you know, making that a part of our story now. So like Rokafella, like the entrepreneurship piece, that's always what we're talking about, you know, like, how do we do this? How can we still have honor and respect and integrity in what we do when we show up with what we show up with, whatever our gifting is? And like, now I see your grandfather in you. It's just different, you know? And I know how hard you work to, like, as one of the, you know, we don't have any children. We don't have children. And so this is, you know, we're doing this from, like, I'm doing this for my cousin's kids at this point, right? But it's important. And so everybody has a role in your family. And if you feel that this is where you belong, run with it. Run with it, because this is a part of making the future better, period. There's no confusion. There's a lot of spaces that our children don't have to be confused about anymore. So thank you, Mel, for this. This is the biggest gift and an amazing blessing for our family. So thank you.
Thank you. So Anna, Roca wanted to know what my new name was. You wanna tell her.
Eureka! Eureka!
Her dad renamed me. Hold on, you're on mute, Ma. You're on mute.
Eureka sounds perfect. It's like that's the expression, right? Eureka! I found something.
That's what Puppy calls her now. He's like, ¿Cómo está Eureka? Because, you know, it's just too much. It's like, So Eureka Maldonado, hello.
She has literally sent me a video of them talking about the genealogy and like without cracking a smile, it's just straight up Eureka. And what did Eureka find now? And Eureka what? And oh my God, I just like rolling watching those clips.
It's beautiful. Please keep it. That's a new tribal, new incarnation, new iteration. Keep that. I like that. Eureka.
Eureka, hello. Deja el show, como dice Belly.
So tell us what is something that was like the most surprising thing you found out during this process or you came across in this process?
I think one of the biggest things was when you said that I have family from Culebra. Because, you know, again, like you were saying today, we're so based, we're entrenched in that town, that mountain town. And then you said there's somebody from this little island way out, Culebra. And so even my dad was like, ¿Qué? I was like, yeah. And it's his line. It's not mommy's line. It's his line. So that I think really threw me off. I already told my sister, I was like, bueno, we gotta go to Culebra.
Right.
With that name, with those names in hand.
I'm a hitchhike with you.
Right? Because
Yo
I've never been.
Yo
Vamos para allá.
Nos
Hacemos
fuimos.
coro. Hacemos un
Chacho.
coro. We'll be like, we're gonna perform. Lah Tere and Roca are gonna do a show. And then when we're not performing, we're like,
Sumando, right?
una investigación, because Culebra, it's so far out the way. And yet people were in migration, they were shifting. There was all this changes that was happening, like you said, since the Spaniards came in. So that was a thing for me. Everything else, of course, beautiful, but we have a trip to make to Culebra.
Yes, we do.
Somebody loves.
Yes, and Ana has family from Toalta. We found Guaynabo. You can see how Guaynabo's right. Aguas. She's got a family line that goes back to Aguas. So there's a lot to keep researching there. And how about you, Tere?
Oh, I would have to say the name Inocencia and what she experienced. And that was the biggest, like having a name that far and knowing that she was actually enslaved, right? Again, it's just not this thing that we're like, oh, well, maybe my ancestors were enslaved. Like having the documentation that states it and the possibility of what she was for that community, right? For that, it's a name that it just has meaning beyond what I can explain to you. Because now when I, in my spirituality, it's a different, I can see farther. And so the messages are farther and a lot more wise. And so the downloads that are coming in from Inocencia, and it's just intense. It's amazing. It's magic. It's like an oracle, like knowing the oracles in our family, like real oracles that existed, not just these ideas of, we got all these people behind us. It's like, oh, wow.
So there are a couple of questions coming in. I see a couple from Jasmine. Before I get to those, I want to mention, to what it is just talking about. And I mentioned that I started genealogy for my own family in 1997. It's been going. I've had a couple of branches of my own where I just hit a brick wall. I just couldn't find past a certain point. And I was working on theaters, working. I may just been entrenched in this church in Trujillo Bajo, which again, as I mentioned, unfortunately does not exist anymore.
Right.
And in a town that doesn't exist. But I just said, if you can't see here on social, you'll see my name listed as my full genealogical name, Melanie Maldonado Diaz. And so for a lot of my other branches, I know kind of where they go, but this Diaz branch, like they settled in San Juan, in Viejo San Juan. And if you just know kind of migration patterns in Puerto Rico, like nobody's really from San Juan, Viejo San Juan. They go there just like it's just a global phenomenon. People go to the urban centers looking for work. plain and simple. But my grandfather was born there. My great grandfather was born there. My tatarabuelo was born there. And I'm just like, to me, that still wasn't enough for me to feel comfortable saying like, my family's from there. 3 generations born in a place. I mean, I think for most people, that's enough. They'll say, oh, I feel roots there. But I just always felt like this, like longing, like, that Diaz line, like, where are they from? Where are they from? So doing the work with Tere and Tere's family, one of those nights that I was up really late, I'm a night owl, so I was up late, I'm looking, I said, I'm just gonna circle back to my tree and pick one of those branches and see what I find. I went to my great grandfather, Miguel Diaz Cárdenas, who was listed in the 1910 census as a Black man working for 2 white women as a servant in Viejo San Juan. And it's a mother-daughter. The mother's married, but she's listed as married, but as the head of household, which creates confusion. Like, where's her husband? How it's odd that 2 women would be living with a manservant. And again, like, I couldn't find any other records about him. Mentions of him, but not records. So Jasmine, to your question about where did we get the records dating back to the late 1700s, it's a mention of those people. And by how we know when the other people were born, they had to have been born into the late 1700s in order to have children who were the ones that we do have other information for. So same thing, like I didn't have more information. So I just started looking, and I look sometimes by last name combination. Diaz is not a very uncommon name, but I said, well, Diaz Cárdenas, let's see what pops up. And at La Parroquia Nuestra Señora de la Caridad y San Miguel in Trujillo Bajo, there's a family, Ramón Diaz and Ramona Cárdenas, baptizing children in the years around the time when my tatarabuelo, Miguel Diaz Cárdenas, was born in 1845. There's a couple baptizing their children at that same church. Of all the churches on the island, of all the municipios on the island, of all the barrios on the island, the same church. And I'm like, what? And then I know that his son, Miguel's son, Sabino, ends up being born in Viejo San Juan. And then I have several generations there born in Viejo San Juan. Well, when I look, I still wasn't convinced. I started looking at, all right, where did these people end up? They're in Trujillo Bajo in the 1830s and 1840s. But I still am like, I'm not sure if they're actually my family. They could be, because I cannot find that name combination in that decade, in that time span, anywhere else on the island. But still, it's the researcher in me. Like, I'm very suspect of all information that comes in, even if I find it. And so I'm looking. My great-grandfather Sabino was born in Viejo San Juan about 1883. So when Miguel is 40-ish years old, he's now having family in Viejo San Juan. Well, where do I find all these new potential siblings in Viejo San Juan? Where do these Ramón Diaz and Ramona Cárdenas, where are they buried in 1880 and 1882? But La Parroquia San Francisco de Asís in Viejo San Juan. 3 years and 1 year respectively before my great-grandfather's born in Viejo San Juan. So this just happened the last couple of weeks, and I'm like geeked because I made a break in my own tree, I think. I'm still like, not 100%, but it seems very possible. And then I'm like going back to, wait a second, Tere. We have like a DNA connection way back there too that we found. Like, we need to explore this. So this work is spirit work. It's ancestor work. Ancestor work is about getting in tune, but it's having that openness to receive. Because if you're not open to receive, you won't. You're going to get surface information, a name, a location, an occupation. But if you're not really ready for the information, it won't be released to you. And having had that information released to me, that I very possibly have a connection also to Trujillo Bajo, that my ancestors were baptized there also, that wouldn't have resonated with me the same way a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 20 something years ago when I first started. So it's always about timing, and it's always about, you know, openness and doing the work on an ongoing basis. So this work continues. We're way over. We have one more question from Jasmine. I think I answered. Jasmine asks, Melanie, what do you use to locate these records? I think I answered all the other questions that have come through. There are many different resources. As I mentioned, I use lots of resources. History, I read everything. I'm just constantly reading. I love this book. It only identifies people who in any record, and they don't even have everybody, because I have found some records that they don't have. It just means that the members didn't come across that particular record. But this only captures people who were born in Africa. So it doesn't include everybody who's an Afrodescendiente, but that's a great resource. Ancestry used to be, where did I get the book from SPG? Directly from SPG. Sociedad Puertorriqueña de Genealogía, you have to go to their website. They have a Facebook page. It's not on Amazon. They only sell their own books from their website. Sociedad Puertorriqueña de Genealogía. Thank you, Mia. But I go to Ancestry. I do not look at other people's trees until I'm done. Then I look and say, I just want to peek. And usually what I see is like a circular. When I look at the source for their notes or their fact, it'll link to another tree. And then I go to that tree and it links to another tree. So there's actually no documentation, which it's like bochinche. there's no roots or grounding source. And for me, those grounding sources are important. So in Ancestry.com was founded by the same group, Mormons, who owned another website called FamilySearch.org. And up until very recently, you used to have to flip page by page of these books. And you have to start like, okay, I'm gonna look from 1881 to 1893 in this community. And you flip and flip. And sometimes things were ill cataloged. So they were actually in another group of years. And it was very painstaking. I did it for years. The difference with Ancestry is that you were really buying access, not to the material, because the material was available for free on Family Search, but you were buying access to an algorithm that would scan the document, pick up on words, and then feed you out. Like you would put in your ancestor's name and it would give you all these leaves, like possible document, possible document, possible document. Well, the Mormons sold Ancestry.com about a year and a half ago to a hedge fund. So if you have a test with Ancestry.com, a hedge fund owns your DNA. What they want that for, I don't know. But if you see somebody looking like you in a decade or two, who knows if they're cloning, I don't know. But I think, this is my guess, is that Family Search, when they sold that company, they retained rights to their algorithm, because now in Family Search, FamilySearch.org, you go in there, you type an ancestor's name, and an algorithm, you no longer have to flip the pages. So they must have retained access to their own or a version of that algorithm. It's very easy to use. You get many more documents. I like it better than Ancestry. Like I house my trees in Ancestry, but I primarily use Family Search. You get access to with the algorithm. Now, I hated it before. I didn't like it before. Hate is strong, but I didn't like it before. But recently, I've abandoned Ancestry for searching for documents. So that's I hope that answers your question. If you have any last questions for our panelists, please, this is the time in our Q&A box to pose those questions. I know folks have been writing in the chat. Thank you so much for that.
There's a question there about where the previous recordings are. I think Lisette Cuevas asked.
So those are archival for now. That's just part of the PROPA archive for now. I'm like a one-woman operation. So I'm doing all the research and the interviews and the recording and everything. I want to curate the material, the content, and it'll be available down the road. But the series will continue next month. We are shifting on other. So last month was contemporary bomberos. February, the month before that, was descendants of bomberos, some of which are practitioners, but not everybody. So the last 3 months in a row, we have people in different Afro-diasporic practices. So bomba last month, hip hop this month, and New Eurekan poetry for next month. So next month, we've got 3 New Eurekan poets, who, just some really fascinating finds there as well. It's going to be great. So I'm looking forward. I hope you'll join us. That'll be the last Sunday of May as well. And hopefully by then I'll have an update for you about the rest of the series. I might take the summer off. Like, it's a lot of ancestor work. I think I need some rest. So for my own, just to recharge, I may take the summer off, and we'll probably kick it off for the fall, but I'll have more details at our next panel.
But you have a conference in September, a virtual conference.
I do. So
can you share about that a little bit?
Yeah. So every 2 years, I put on the Bomba Research Conference. The first 3 were in Chicago in 2005, 7, and 9. Since 2011, I've taken them to Puerto Rico. And in Puerto Rico, for me, it's very important to have these conversations in ancestral spaces. So sometimes we're in un callejon, in a marquesina, we're at, in a town plaza, like under a tree, and we just have conference panels in these spaces that were important to Bomba ancestors. So this year, we're still trying to work out all the details, but about how much of it will be virtual, and if we're able to do any part of it that's live. But that always takes place. You can just mark it on your calendar from now till forever. And every odd year over Labor Day weekend. So if you've been itching to get on a plane, maybe that's your opportunity to go to Puerto Rico. You've been reserving that trip. Maybe you want to come hang with us, and we do live bomba. We're in ancestral spaces. We're hearing from elders. We're hearing from descendants. We're hearing from eyewitnesses. We're hearing from lots of different folks who speak to us about those ancestors. So that's what's coming up. So the next panel, last Sunday in May, which I believe it's the 30th of May. So the day before Memorial Day, we'll be gathering again to hear from some New Eurekan poets. So I did see one question. Jasmine, she wants to know if I can be hired to do some of this work. Let's talk. I actually have.
She can be hired. Yes. Yes. Let's get her some work.
Oh my goodness. I wish I could do this full time. Really, really. I love ancestor work.
You will.
You're building. Right now I got a day job. I got to figure out the day job kids, like how to make this work.
And this work is gonna expand, because that's right there. That's how it works, right? Because I know you had a day job. I had a day job when I was younger.
Yeah, we faded out of that one. So we're standing in the gap for you, sis, right now.
I receive it.
Yes. Your bendiciones, your bendiciones are coming, baby.
They're going. And thank you for wearing the earrings that I make. So
you know,
there we go.
I
recognize them. Yes.
Okay, irons are here, flags. Can I just say
entrepreneurialism?
That's right. That's right. Can I just say that Hector Garcia in the 6th grade, when I was in 6th grade, Hector Garcia gave me my first pair of fat laces, pink laces. So that's why when I ordered Roca's earrings, she's like, oh, I don't have the pink. I said, I'll wait. I need my pink laces.
Too.
But only you would know about fat laces in hip hop, because there's a lot of people who they're like, I don't want to wear shoelaces on my ears. Roca, what else you got? I'm like, all right, I got fabric. But people like you know.
I grew up watching people with linoleum under their arm going to go break. So
thank you.
Yes.
Where can people go to get your earrings?
Roca.
Okay, so now that we're on the entrepreneurial,
Do it, do it. Yes.
LaRocaSoul.com. I'll type it in the chat. There's a bigcartel.com. I put 3, you can put any of your products on bigcartel.com and they'll help you sell it for free. So that's another way for people who are watching right now who make things. Bigcartel.com is a great resource. And our girl, Two Fly, who's an amazing graffiti artist, put me up on that. So, but I have it on my website, LaRocaSoul.com. Thank you, Tere. And Tere, thank you for all the work you do. You are goddess, diva, queen, boss lady, mentor, and you hold my heart. Thank you for checking in with me recently when I was kind of, well, I had an ear infection too. So that was also bringing me down, but thank you. Thank you,
I love you
Tere, for all the
forever.
work you do. Thank you. Thank you.
We
Thank you
got
for
a
being with my sister La Tere.
Always.
Thank
You
you.
can count
You're
on it.
blessing to
we got a
hip-hop.
Mama's Hip Hop Kitchen panel coming up.
We do.
Tell us
and
about
not-
that.
Yes.
Right. Tell us, Tere.
Okay. What is the date though? Hold on. I gotta look through my stuff. It's coming up. Espérate un segundation. Espérate. May
Secondation.
19th.
I love it.
May 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, storytelling through dance. So La Roca is going to be talking to us through this cool webinar that we have. We're interviewing beautiful sisters that have been a part of the work with Mama's Hip Hop Kitchen for over a decade. And she is one of those people, out of the, 8 or 9 people, she's just been a solid rock.
Well, you all open a platform for people who do the work. And honestly, the dancers that I have don't normally make auditions or get hired. And so you're giving them a stage. You're giving them a platform. I'm honest, in New York City, there's a lot of dancers, but who makes it? It's not usually the girl next door. It's not, so what you do with Mama's Hip Hop Kitchen is you give people who are not commercially, or they don't look at whatever, they aren't a certain way. You're saying, come here, I got a mic for you, I have turntables, I have people for you. And so thank you, La Tere, for just all the work you do. You really do catch people, and I hope that I can help catch you when you're going through your roller coaster ride.
You have, trust me, you have. That's why I'm so excited to be on this journey with you, because this is like this solidifies. It's just beautiful that our ancestors have always been loving on each other, that they made sure that our connection was this, that we can stay in order, right? That it's about obedience, not sacrifice. It's about us being obedient in this work, and that because our legacies are that important. And so it's just exciting. And like Mel, like now having this connection with Mel and her possibly being my family. And I've been calling her Comay before all of this, like, you're my Comay. Like, and I didn't know that she was going to be the comadre of this work for my family. So it's like, it's beautiful, because as we get older, things eliminate themselves. And then you start really being able to like connect with your tribe, all of the other stuff kind of fades out, and then this is where we're at. So it's exciting. It's so exciting, and I honor your ancestors, yours too, Mel. And I'm just in gratitude. Oh, one more thing. This has been medicine, for me. This has been medicine. This has been very healing. This is not just, again, this thing that I'm discovering these names, and it's cool to be able to say this. Like, there is like that ancestral pain that Anna was talking about, that we never knew we were carrying. We didn't understand what we were carrying. And so it makes sense that that deep pain that I felt was the possibility of my chona being a breeder of an enslaver, and being actually her being enslaved. And so we've come a long way in our line, from having to experience that to being able to travel around the world because of hip hop, or having a school named after you because, shoot, you put in the work. So it's exciting. And I'm full. I feel full. I have a lot more love to give. How about that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Ancestral love is a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Tere. I also feel replenished. Thank you.
All three of you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, sis. I can't wait to hug you.
I know. Right? Oh, we need that. We need that.
We need
Yeah.
hugs.
Well,
We totally need hugs.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you both for being open to allowing me to be part of this journey with you. I mean, ancestor work is personal, it's intimate. I mean, look at how we've gone into the lives of these people and just, you know, it's deep and not everybody wants to allow that access. And you both said yes. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful
Thank
for that
you.
trust.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And that now when I say archaic, I gotta not use it in a, in a negative term. Oh, that's just archaic. Actually, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm an archaic. That's right.
Archaico is a good thing. So,
And
okay,
genealogically, I said this, but it's worth repeating. I said this on other panels. Genealogically, you are whatever your mother is, and so, you know, and it's just kind of logic of why that, and we know what body, you know, a child comes out of, and so that is enough to kind of cement that. But we are also all of those ancestors, all of them. And Anna, just like we were talking about earlier, like you got them like with you, just like carrying you and moving you along in this life and taking you where you're meant to go, and you're doing it. You're open to it.
Yeah, I think I might start actually signing all my papers now with a T or an X, just to honor Grandpa, because you know, I think that that was brave, that he was like, I don't write, but I can do this, and leave his mark. So I think that might be something I start doing just to honor that bravery, being a Black person and having your own business, you know, knowing at any minute they can kill you and you will be buried con una cruz de palo, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
That's the truth. The truth. That's been untrue.
yeah, so we know that that's brave. And that is same thing for you. Like your ancestors took a step forward. They created a school, and you know they could have been disappeared quickly. Somebody could have, let's get that woman, and she disappears.
Yes.
But she was brave. She was supported by her community, and she opened a school, and it's still there. So
Yes.
on that, I know that you stand, and I commend you, and I bow my head to you and your ancestors too.
Beautiful.
Respect.
Beautiful. Well, love, love, love to you both. Thank you everyone for taking your afternoon. I know with the pandemic and restrictions, like, you know, easing up, you could easily be anywhere else right now. So thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. And all these ancestors, thank you for bringing your ancestors to the table. We could just feel all this energy. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Follow PROPA on a Facebook group. It's Puerto Rican Organization for the Performing Arts. Make sure and follow Tere. Make sure and follow Roca. There's a lot of love here, a lot of ancestral love. So follow it all, be a part of it. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Peace.